lounging, son.
All right, welcome back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan, and back with me again, I got Rocko Jerome, I got Craig CK. They got a new Kickstarter, which is actually the fourth project in the Ghost Agents series. Have them back on to talk about the project. Super excited to have you guys on.
Yeah, man.
Good to be here.
Same for us, I'm sure. Interesting that you say fourth project in the Ghost Agents lineup, because it actually was the first, as it turns out. It's a very interesting story. Every Ghost Agents comic is actually a spin-off of this comic.
Well, like, why didn't you start with this one? Why was this one?
You asked. It's an interesting story. So to not mess up the sequence of events here. First off, I want to say, Ryan, thank you so much for doing this. It's a great pleasure to talk to you again, to be here with my good friend Craig. You are the number one person that I think of when I think of somebody who does these types of podcasts, because you are very good at what you do. I want to say that the way that you edit these is great. The first time that I was on your show, my only trepidation was like, well, he edits things, so it's not just like a straight up, just somebody rambling. Myself, I'm referring to. But you do a great job of making it as presentable as possible, and you're excellent at what you do. So anybody who might be in the comics world, the indie comics world, the real comics world, the bigger comics world, I shouldn't say real. I've only been awake for about 5 minutes, but by all means, you can trust Ryan. He's going to take good care of you. Excellent at what you do. So everything I do in these comics, with this comics world, I owe to Craig, because it was a very fortuitous chance meeting with Craig on a Zoom like 4 days into COVID that changed my whole world in a lot of ways. COVID had hit. It was the official point at which we were like shut down. They were telling people not to go anywhere they didn't have to, or talk to anybody they don't have to, and yada, yada. And there was a Zoom link, just like an open Zoom link in the Cartoonist Kayfabe Ringside Seats group. And I popped in mainly just to learn how Zoom worked, because I knew I was going to have to start doing Zoom for my job. So I was like, I'll just do this and see who's in here and see how Zoom works. Like, that's what my brain was the direction my brain was going on that day. And then I meet Craig, and we start talking about this image grand design thing, which I'd sort of like seen little bits and pieces that people were talking about doing it. And the words that would change the course of my life were, you know, I want to draw this Jack Kirby Bruce Lee thing for it. Do you want to write it? It's like, yeah, I do. Yeah. And then, you know, from there we started to work together, and then, you know, we both made all these new friends as a result of that whole deal. It's sort of a, in our little world, it's sort of a legendary thing at this point. It automatically began collaborating. We were each other's first collaborator in comics. It went really well. You know, we developed a sort of a shorthand, sort of figured out a way that the two of us communicated well, both as friends and as collaborators. There came to a point with image grand design where, since I wasn't drawing any of it, I drew a page, but that's not really my forte, as established. Came a point where everyone had their marching orders. They come up with what they were going to be drawing, what the story was that they were telling, how it linked with every other one. And I was done. I didn't have anything to do. And it was just waiting for pages to come back in around everybody's real life, whatever else they had working on. So I needed to be creative in that moment, because not only was there COVID, but I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and the horrible situation with Breonna Taylor was leading to a lot of tribulation in my town. Mm-hmm. And I had nothing to work on all of a sudden, because image grand design didn't need me at that moment. That being the case, it was like, well, I need to do something. So I talked to Craig a little bit. And it's like, hey, if we do another comic, would you be into that? Was that something you would entertain? And he said yes. So I started writing this Ghost Agent thing. At that time, it was singular, Ghost Agent. It's a spinoff from a prose series that I did that anybody could check out on Amazon called Ben Venice. Ghost Agent is like a spinoff of that, which is interesting too, because maybe interesting is the wrong word, because it's only been read by a small handful of people. Very few people read Ben Venice, but that's where all the Ghost Agent stuff started. So anybody who's interested in this stuff, by all means, please check that out. So I started writing the script, and the idea was that it would be like a newspaper strip format, like a Secret Agent X9 was kind of the thing I had in my head. And I love spy fiction and spy tropes and all that stuff. So it was the first thing that I wrote to be this sort of the sequence. And it was always going to be online first. That was always kind of the idea. It would be like a weekly strip and would eventually get collected into a bigger book. And then just a lot of other stuff happened. life goes in odd directions. I never wanted anyone else to do that book. I wrote it for Craig, and that was the whole plan. So it's like, well, what can I do right now while Craig is busy with various things? And it's like, well, I still want to play in this world. So other characters started to have stories written for other artists, right? So that's how Ghost Agents came to be. So long answer to a short question, but that's how it went, and that's where we are with this now.
Yeah, I mean, I was super stoked to see Craig's name on a book. You know, like I think I was first backer, right? I made it. Yeah, I clicked that link so fucking quick.
I love that means something to you.
Yeah, well, because I think we talked about before the first book dropped, right? Like I'm like,
didn't quite make it.
I'm gonna try to be the first backer, but I was at work. Luckily, you guys launched it on my day off. So the minute I got the email, I think
you were still like the second backer on the first book.
Yeah, I tried.
You did a pretty good job of getting right into it.
Yeah, I've been loving what you've been doing with Ghost Agents, all the artists that you're bringing on, but obviously, like, I've developed a friendship with Craig, you know, like over the past, I guess, past couple of years, right? Since before I think Image Grand Design even came out, maybe it was after, I'm not quite sure, but yeah, I'm super happy to see Craig on a book. You know, anytime I can get some of his stuff, I'm always down to see it. But like I said, like, so this is the fourth release, but it was the first written. So was it just like other projects were coming up? What was
I mean, that'll be, Craig will have a better answer than me, but Craig had a lot going on. He's a tattoo artist.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those deals where it's like, you know, when you draw on people all day, I don't know if when you come home, you're necessarily in a great rush to.
Yeah, it can be a little bit daunting at times. Like I showed when we were wrapping this portion of the book up, I showed Rocko like my schedule for the last 6 months to give him some idea of like just how insanely busy I am. And it's like you go through and it's like every day I have an appointment. You know what I mean? And that translates into I have to draw all those little dots that are on my calendar. So at times it can be a pretty daunting task, but I always manage to draw comics every night. So it takes a little bit, but I also like the other part of this too is like we had Rick Lopez and I had started Rick Lopez, David Grom, and then Eli started Next Panel Press, which this project fit in kind of naturally. And we kind of set a further release date down the road, and then Rocko and I had discussed about releasing it on there, which was really cool to me because it was like, you know, that was part of like my project with some of the other IGD guys, and then I got to bring this into it. So it just seemed like the timing all kind of fell into place, but it was the first written, but there was not a real stamp of like, hurry up, we got to get this done, because we knew it was going to be released in like how MPP works is bi-weekly for, you know, there's like 10 or 12 of us. So it's like one group 1 week, the next group the next week. So it just kind of fell into place. And then, yeah, from there, we got to a certain point and said, yep, let's put this one out. And the first part of the story out of the first story because I want this to continue, because I enjoy working with Rocko a lot, and we work really well together. It's like you said, we have a really good shorthand, and that says something because I'm not the easiest person to work with, especially artistically. And I think it just comes from being a tattoo artist and not really, like I always tell people, it's the only business where the customer's always wrong. So it's like someone brings me an idea and I'm like, no, we're not doing that. We have to do it this way. And so I can be really difficult and sometimes obtuse and a little bit hot-headed at times. And Rocko is always really, really, really good to me and really understanding and gives me the time and space I need. So I want to continue to work on this. That's the main thing.
But Rocko, I that's what I love about you, and I always hear this. Everybody that you work with is kind of, I don't want to say boss isn't the right word, but like kind of the overseer of what you're of the projects, right? You just you have the artists that you collaborate with, and you let them do their thing, and you let them shine, you know,
Right.
and you kind of you don't try to rein anybody in, is what I've always felt, and I think that it shows in every single story, because no two stories feel the same, even though it's you writing it, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's the true collaboration of comics, and I think that's why all the Kickstarters keep being so successful. And I think I feel like they go up every time. Maybe I'm wrong. I didn't look at the numbers from 2 and 3, but I know 1 to 2 went up, didn't it? Between 1 and 2.
1 and 2 had to go up because we had a much higher goal for that one.
Oh, okay. Okay.
2, the second one, I don't want to get too derailed here, but I do want to say this. The second one was so stressful. It was so stressful because there's that concept of the sophomore slumps, right? Where the second time you try to do something, it doesn't work, or like, you know, if it blows up on the tarmac, then you're done, right? Like it's over. You don't get to do another one after that. Like you blew it. And the way that Ghost Agents rather works is that generally, as a rule, the work is finished, right? Like I don't ever want to be in a position where we've sold a book that I then have to count on some third party on another continent someplace to finish a book, and then it doesn't happen, and I don't like being in that predicament. So the stories were all written. I'd already promised everybody that we're going to get paid, and we have this second Kickstarter. And it was the middle of the month, and we were not halfway through to our goal. I mean, it was a tight race, as they say in politics. Okay. And it was scary. It was really scary. And we made it. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like, you know, think about like movies, and we'll talk more about the parallel to movies as we go forward. But it's like when a movie has a sequel, the second movie, and it works, then it's good for another 3, 4, 5 movies, usually, however many movies they want to make. You know, now they don't put a cap on that anymore, but like getting that second one, that once you have 2, I think people started to think of it differently, right? Mm-hmm. Like with the second one, we didn't have as many people that like jumped right on immediately, right? I think they were still kind of getting an idea of what it was. And you know, what it is at this point is like blown wide open. And anybody that's looking at Ghost Agents can tell that it's not just a book about 60s spy stuff. And that was deliberate. Like I pulled that trick on people deliberately. I wanted it to be like, you know, that sense that like, oh, this is going to be this. I always want people to be guessing with what the next Ghost Agents thing is. And for Ghost Agent stories that are going forward, not to give too much away, we're going to like the distant past into the far future and outer space, and all sorts of stuff is going on. And that's because I really like to be able to, when I collaborate with an artist, be able to give them enough room to where they are making something that is exciting to them. And then what comes back to me is like, it's almost like my subconscious helped to make a comic happen, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it's like, I want to read the comics that I want to read, or I want to be able to kind of make something to where it's like, this is cool for me too. So, you know, I think there's a lot of, I'm not going to throw any names out there. I don't really know too many people like this personally anyway, but it's like, I think a lot of times with comic writers, like I look at some scripts that are done by other people, and it's just kind of like, Jesus, man, you really just like try to turn this guy into your employee, and he's drawing a comic book for you. you know, and I don't dig that. That's not how I like to work, and that's not the kind of stuff that I want any part of, you know. I remember reading once, I don't remember who said this, but there was somebody that was on Ringside Seats, the group, you know, the Facebook group, who said something along the lines of, if you consider yourself a comic book writer and you aren't just doing the layouts yourself, you don't deserve to be called a writer. And to me, it's like, that is the very last thing I want to do, is to do layouts. I'm a good enough artist to do layouts, I would imagine, you know,
Yeah.
but I can't imagine doing that to someone. That's not fun for me, and that's not fun for them. And it doesn't create what to me is an interesting product in the end. I consider myself to be kind of like left editor behind, because I don't edit. It's not really part of what I do. Like a very little bit do I edit. I think of what I do as being a writer and a producer in the context of what that means in movie making. I'm like the Robert Evans and the guy who writes the screenplay, right? And then the artist is much more important. They're the director, the cinematographer, the special effects, every actor, everything. Everything that ends up on the page is the dominion of the artist, right? You know, sometimes I will write something and then what comes back is very different from what I wrote, right? And I never want to waste anything. So we'll always just figure out a way to use it anyhow, because I appreciate it when somebody goes to the trouble of drawing something and I realize that's not easy, or else I would just fucking do it. Unless it's something where it like injures the very particular story that needs to be the larger story told, I never want to change anything or tell somebody that to go back and change something, unless it pertains directly to the story or something that's very important. We just ride with it. And most things are not important enough to change. This is part of how I work with it. So, you know, I mean, that's my biggest goal is to just hear artists come back and say, like, it's fun to work with Rock. Like, that is to me like the nicest thing anybody can say to me. And it means a lot to me when I hear that. You know, it's part of what's so great about Ghost Agents is that and another thing that I feel really proud of is that it's designed to get artists paid. I haven't made any money off of it. I'm okay with that. That's not what I'm trying to do here. You know, it's the whole idea is that when we were working on Image Grand Design, there was no money. We weren't allowed to make money off of it because it wasn't our properties.
Right.
A lot of what we learned on that as a group is what I'm applying to Ghost Agents. The way that Image Grand Design worked was we needed every part because there's one big story being told there, and it would all fall apart without any part of the story. So we couldn't go to press until it was done. So I was in the uncomfortable position of having to sometimes fire people. Maybe fire is too strong a word, but like it was set up so that like if you weren't ready at a certain point as an artist, it was going to hold up the whole shebang.
You had to cut them.
Yeah, exactly. We managed to get it out in pretty much good time, but still it was just not a great position to be in. So the way that Ghost Agents works generally is I mostly don't need anything. Like I'll have for the 3 issues that have come out, you know, they all ended up being like 30 to 40 pages. Those could have been like 70 to 80 pages, but there were people who their lives got in the way and they weren't able to finish it. And generally that's not a problem. I understand. We all have lives to lead. None of us are doing this as our job or a real job. So Ghost Agents is set up so that things can take a while. They can take as long as they take, and it's not a problem. So that's part of it. And to me, that sort of leads to a more interesting project. Like if I look at the previous issues, I can definitely see how what I envisioned was very different, and that's a good thing. It's fine. Like I'm totally okay with that. It's mostly interesting to me to be able to see what is made out of the very initial spark of an idea that I come up with.
And Craig, you know, like you talked about how the customer's always wrong in terms of like them telling you how to do your job, for lack of a better way of saying it. What is the difference in terms of like working with somebody that's writing a story as opposed to like telling you like, I want this image on my body, I want it done this way? Like, how's that relationship been with Rocko?
It's been good. Like, he's pushed me a lot. Like, he says he doesn't get involved a lot in the artwork, and I think that's probably true in a more general sense. But with this project, he was a little bit. It was a little bit closer to his heart. So I remember we had like a 45-minute discussion about a watch. I hope he remembers that fondly because it was funny. But we had a discussion about a watch that wasn't fitting in the in the right timer, and I wasn't seeing it a certain way. But it's always really, those conversations typically are really easy. It's not hard at all. Like, the way this book was colored is really kind of a really good example of how this works. So I had done, when we had released it on NPP, it was released in black and gray. And then in order to bring it to the book, we wanted to add color to it. And Rocko messaged me one night. It was like a fever dream he had. And he's like, I want it colored kind of looking like a wax pack. It really kind of put things like in a spin. And I was like, hey, like, okay. And I kind of put it off because I knew I wasn't going to add the color to it till closer to the release of the actual book. But it kind of changed how I would draw things for it, like kind of simplify it a little bit. Maybe not so much in, I kind of took the Liefeld approach of kind of fudging on some backgrounds and making them really kind of simplistic, because I just kept seeing these really vibrant wax packs and stuff. And it sent me down this rabbit hole to find these digital brushes that would simulate a wax pack. I had sent a color kind of layout to Rocko, and he really kind of pushed it. It was like, no, like go further with it. And then it just turned into this really kind of weird, yet I think it's kind of cool, and people seem to be responding to it. Kind of format. It's much easier working with Rocko than it is with the average customer, on a whole, to answer your question. But yeah, it's like.
And what are you, so you guys said you have plans for more than this one shot? Like, this is a continuing story within the Ghost Agents?
Definitely.
Yeah, so go ahead, Rocko. You go ahead.
Well, so I'll just say this quickly because I do want Craig to talk on this too. But like, the way that, if you go back and look at Secret Agent X9, the ones that are done by Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson especially, but they've collected those in big books, IDW did.
Okay.
The way that those worked were every month or so, like a story would be told, a full story. And it's always like, you picture that being read. It's a world that doesn't exist anymore, but like, some dude gets up in the morning to go to work, his wife's making breakfast, he's reading the paper, he gets to the comic strips, and there's this 4-panel comic about the secret agent. And it's always like, it ends on something of a cliffhanger, and it begins on resolving the previous cliffhanger. Even if the cliffhanger is as small as like, who's that person behind the shade or whatever, and it's like, oh, it's my buddy, my boyfriend, my girlfriend, whatever. Like, it's like, a lot of times the resolution is very small and slender, but those stories would be told in such a way, because you can't just have this thing going on forever in a comic strip, because eventually you have to hit the story beats. It has to have a point where you get to the climax, and then you sort of turn over to whatever it is. The mystery is solved, or the person is rescued, or whatever happens. So I wrote this almost sort of unconsciously in the same way, right? So there's like 4 little stories within this thing.
Okay.
And it's a character called Max Almond, who is a secret agent guy, almost very sort of deliberately generic. But yeah, I wrote these 4, and as we were doing this and getting to the point that we needed to put this thing out, it's like, well, so doing it in this very novel format that it's in, which is important to note too, so that people aren't surprised when they get it, but it's going to be 4 inches by 8 inches.
Oh, dope.
Yeah, right?
That's
I'm very
awesome.
excited for this. When you open it, it's 2 panels on each page, right? So like, you'll sort of experience it in a different way than you do most comics. It's designed to like force you to look at each panel in a way that you don't blow by it. That's what we're going for with this. So we were working on what that looks like and what it will cost to make sure it's cost effective. And we figured out pretty quickly that what we already have is going to be 30 pages. It's like, well, we push it any further, it's going to be more expensive, harder sale, less, it'll be a little bit more difficult for people to sort of like absorb it all in one sitting or whatever. So we made the decision to split it in two, which is fine by me. You know, down the road, we'll probably end up putting it together into one book and doing something with it that way. But that's the story with that. I just want to interject that really quickly. Craig, what do you got to say about that?
That's pretty much it. Like that's how it worked. The beats worked perfectly. The story split into two, and I'm hoping with what I know about the character, I don't want to give too much away. I know that there's more to come. And on a friendship level, I think it's important for me to continue on working with Rocko. It's good for my mind, to be honest. It helps me, focus and get something done. I don't think I would ever draw a comic book for anyone else, another writer. I'm not into that because we work so well and because I can say things to Rocko and he's not going to take it to heart. And so I want to continue to do it because it's really good for me. Rocko doesn't, I find that when I'm drawing my own stuff, sometimes I try to I think I'm subconsciously limiting myself on what I'm going to draw while I'm writing because I'm thinking about it as a whole, where this is a little bit more challenging because Rocko doesn't see those blocks in my head where I'm trying to maybe I'm trying to avoid a major crowd scene or something. Like that's not going to fly. I can't do that. So it forces me to work a little bit harder. But the main thing too for me is that it keeps Rocko and I in constant contact because sometimes you get close to people and you can kind of lose touch and it's very, it might be very sporadic, but Rocko and I, we're constantly in contact and not just about this, but this is always a good reaching point. If there's ever, if there's a lull or whatever, like, hey, this and this, or it's just nice. And we're great friends. And it's mostly because of Rocko, because of his patience. And I don't want to stop making this. So I don't know. It just kind of, it's got a really good spot in my heart with because of Rocko and Rocko's got a place in my heart for it too. So I just want to keep making them, keep going, keep challenging myself that way.
And that's definitely true here. I mean, it's something I think about a lot is there's the statistics tell us that guys die well before women a lot of time, right? Good 5 to 10 years. And I think what a lot of that is that men are sort of conditioned in our society to not be friends with each other and sustain friendship and do the work sometimes that it takes to continue to be friends with somebody, right? You think back to when you're a kid and you have a falling out with another kid, and this goes well into my 20s, over some stupid shit, and then you're not friends anymore, and then you don't have that friend anymore, because you didn't do the work, you didn't put the work in. And I think that what Craig and I have certainly sort of found out, at this point in our life, is that friendship is more important than all the other stuff. But having something like this gives us as dudes a reason to continue to be friends, right? You see situations where here locally, I remember there used to be a McDonald's that I would go to in the morning for this job that I had. And the reason that I would go to this McDonald's a lot wasn't because I particularly love McDonald's breakfast, but it was because there was this group of old guys that I would always sort of enjoy observing, because that was the place they would go, which was kind of sad in a way because it should have been a cool diner, but they didn't have one around. And these guys would just go and talk about the McGriddle. That McGriddle's crazy. We sure didn't do that when we were kids. That's what their point of reference was. And it was their bonding zone, right? Some of my local friends that are around my age, this group of dudes that I spend time with, it's all wrestling. you know, and it's like we all watch wrestling and talk about it. It's like that's just sort of the thing that becomes the thing where you have an excuse to keep talking and not fall out of touch, because it's very easy to do that. You know, we all have friends where it's like, let's get lunch, and then you never do. So like if you have something like this to work on, you always can kind of return back to. Speaking of the thing that I was saying earlier about like how some things to me in storytelling are very important and I'll hold on to them and I'll make a bigger deal about it than other things, was like Craig mentioned the watch, right? So like there's a lot of stuff in the story where it's like, I don't care. Draw an old car, draw an old guy, draw a fight, draw, you know, like I like to think that I give a lot of latitude. And a funny thing about it too is that this script that I wrote for Craig is like one of the earliest ones. It's you know, of its length, it's the only one. And since then, I've sort of like learned to relinquish a lot of that directive. But the watch was important to me because I wanted a round watch, because if it looked like an older watch, it might throw the reader off from what the time period is, which in this case is the early to mid 60s. One of the tenets of ghost agents is that the watch is kind of like a beeper, like an old school beeper, right? An agent, how they get the message that they need to call headquarters or that they're in dire trouble is that it gives an electrical shock, right? Mm-hmm. So they get a shock from this watch, and then they know like they have to call headquarters. Headquarters has a instruction for them or a mission to lay out. Or if they get a sustained shock, that means that they need to fight an impending threat, right? Like somebody's after them or something like that. So for the story to make sense with all the other stories, the watch has to work like that, right? But what I don't always do is explain all that shit, which is on me. So it's like, you know, like this has happened not with Craig, but since, where it's like, I had a pretty particular idea and I kind of, it's like a weird game of charades in a way. Like there's kind of a third party in these types of collaborations. There's me, who sort of is the conception, and then the artist is the person who is in charge of doing most of the heavy lifting of the creative, putting it together into a thing. And then the actualization is kind of like a third party, where it's like a child in a way, not to sound too grandiose about it, but it's like there's what it actually ends up being is like a combination of both of our minds, you know, like either one of us by ourselves could not have made the thing that is the end result. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's very interesting how it works. And I never like to, I hate having, maybe hate's too strong a word, but it's always sort of tricky when it's like, we got to do it like this, because it's almost like you're looking at your baby and you're saying, our baby's got to have a smaller nose. Right? Because it's like, this is sort of like what happened as a result. And I like to try to not do it like that. And the wax pack, like the trade, like when you get like trading cards, when they would come in that wax paper.
I remember those, yeah.
Yeah, like the weird colors. I got a book of those a year or two ago. That's just like incredible. I love the way that the art looks. In looking at Craig's art, I could see it, right? Like I could see it working because it's just the way that it's drawn. Like Craig very deliberately worked in like a Bruce Timm. I know he's a bigger Bruce Timm guy than a Darwin Cook guy, but like that was like one of the directives. I was like, let's try to like use as few lines as possible, you know? So I could see how those colors would work, you know? Like I think before he did, like these colors will work in this. And one of the big things with Ghost Agents is I never want it to look like just some comic book, you know, especially because I think that happens a lot with like a lot of writers who feel like they have to be hands-on on everything and be really controlling. I think it results in boring comics. Like you just kind of end up with comics that like look like that's not what the artist wanted to draw. A bunch of people sitting around talking or whatever. And it becomes very much just like by the book comic book making, you know? And I never want that at all. I want it to be exciting and interesting and push the medium around and stuff like that. I remember reading an interview with a guy who had played for Captain Beefheart, Captain Beefheart. And the guy said that Captain Beefheart, when they were getting ready to record a song, came to him and said, I want you to play this guitar riff as if your mother just died. I want you to tap into deep sorrow. I want you to find something inside of you that makes you sad. And I want you to just work it out. Either do something really sad or just imagine something sad happening. And I want you to right now just play that guitar like that's what's going on with you. The guy was like, he said he was like deeply affected by it. So it's like, even though I don't make art myself, at least not on the level of what anything coming out of Ghost Agents is, I do feel like, and I hope that Craig would agree, that like I have a certain sort of a vision and a way that I can look at stuff and be like, what if this was like this, right? And very proud of the fact that every Ghost Agents thing so far, it doesn't look like anything else. It doesn't even look like most artists' other work, right? Like, because my goal is to create a situation where the work that's being made and the product that's being created, or the art that's being created, is just like somewhere else, like not like anything else, not even anything of a kind, as you observed before. So that's major to me. I always want all this stuff to get weird. That's what it's all about.
There was I can count on my one hand 4 panels that Rocko 5 interjected on, and it was all minimal stuff and stuff that I had kind of lapsed over, and they were breezy conversations, super easy to work with, and it just simplify it or push me in the right direction or push me to do something maybe a little bit bolder than I would normally do, and I think that's the beauty of the whole book, is that it kind of oozes that, at least to me, because I'm on the inside. Hopefully it translates well, but easy to work with, and I think that's the main thing. It's the only reason why I do it. If it was anyone else, I think you both know me pretty well, it would be, go fuck yourself, I ain't got time for this shit. You know what I mean?
I mean, I'm the same person, so I'm constantly saying that to people. I mean, it's like telling somebody how to do their job. I mean, it really is. I mean, if you're not, I'm not saying you can't draw, Rocko, but it's like, if you consider yourself a writer, you don't want somebody telling you how to write your story, just like the artist doesn't want somebody telling them how to draw.
Right.
Here, let me put it to you like this. I say to Rick Lopez all the time, because Rick and I are super close as well, and quietly, and this is not a good thing to say, but I'm always like, if you don't draw, you're not a real person. That's how I look at things, because it's always, to me, it's like, shut up and draw, like, but I see these conversations about writers on Facebook and people like kind of cutting them down, and immediately I get a little bit defensive, and that's because of Rocko, because it's like, hey, like, that's not necessarily true. And if one person fits into my head of being a real person, even though they don't draw, it's Rocko, because he's creating stuff with his mind, and he's not bashing you over the head with it, and he's also giving you enough room to move. It's not an easy thing to collaborate with people. I haven't had that experience, like, outside of being with Rocko, but watching him handle IGD and stuff, and like people, and even people I know, when they've disappointed him or disappointed the project, he's always been, hey, at the end of the day, we're friends. This is just comics, man. Like, it's nothing to get stressed out about. I think I get more agitated on his behalf than he does with people. I don't think I could have that with anyone else, to be honest. And I know that, and I'm not even willing to explore it, because I don't have the patience for it.
Yeah.
But it was an easy project, start to finish, to do, because of that, and that's the goal, is to just keep doing it.
Yeah, well, I'm super stoked for the book. I can't wait to have it in my hands. Anything you guys put out, anything, everybody in the group, if somebody shares a Kickstarter, I don't even really care to look what it's about. I just kind of back it to support everybody. And I love the comics everybody's collaborated with, especially I've seen it more since IGD, obviously, because everybody met each other, I think, through that. But the friendships, like you said, like having a reason to talk to somebody, that was kind of part of the reason that I started interviewing some of the indie guys. And it's also part of the reason why I've asked like Craig, you know, to guest and review books with me, Dr. Ben to guest review books with me. Now Manny has done one, we're about to do another one, you know, like it's a reason to keep in contact with everybody, because, you know, it is hard, you know, especially when you work a full-time job. For me, like I have friends that live like 5 minutes from me, and I probably don't talk to them as much as I may talk to some of you guys, you know.
Yeah,
and
dude.
and it was part of the reason why, like, I mean, I made a post in the group, you know, like I just was having a hard time with like super stressed out at work. A lot of family shit was going on, not with like my wife and kid, but like grandparents losses in the family. And like, I just couldn't find that motivation to like do this, you know. And then I realized that I was also upset because like I wasn't in contact with a lot of the people that I enjoy being in contact with, you know. So I just, before we, you know, wrap it up, I just want to thank you for hitting me up to do this, because you're the first person I haven't rescheduled with.
That's
You know,
awesome.
and I hate to say that to anybody that's watching that I've rescheduled with. I don't take this the wrong way, but like I missed talking to you guys, and not that I don't want to talk to anybody else, but I just want to thank you for like kind of getting me out of my funk, for lack of
Thank you, dude. And like I said, man, like this is the only one of these interviews, excuse me, in video in real time that Craig and I are doing with anybody. Like,
Yeah,
I've done enough
it.
Kickstarters at this point to know that like, if you do a bunch of different of the same kind of press, one thing kind of cancels out the other thing in a way, or like they all kind of cancel each other out, God forbid. So I wanted this to be the only video for this project where it's Craig and me and you. And you got it for the next one too, buddy. Like,
Thank you.
you're the guy. Like, you're the first guy I think of. Not to take, same as what you just said, not to take anything away from anybody else, but to me, you're kind of doing it before anybody, and you're on your shit. And like, this is cool and fun. And thank you very much. This
Before we because I know we all have things we got to get to, but before we wrap it up, any last words on the project, and anything else you guys want to kind of plug or talk about?
Go ahead, Rocco.
One thing that I want to say that I'm afraid I didn't touch on enough is that Next Panel Press is really cool, and this is the first ever project where it's Next Panel Press and Ghost Agents, right? And you know, I wrote this to be a newspaper strip type thing years ago, and then Craig ended up working out a newspaper strip sort of format group thing, so it worked out perfectly. Like, it's just like, well, this can just fit in there very nicely. So it's very cool that Next Panel Press was the original home of this this Max Ullman Ghost Agents story, and I'm very proud of that as well. That it's Next Panel Press and Ghost Agents were sort of like the two original content creations, collaborative creations that came out of CKRS so far, especially came out of Grand Design, Image Grand Design. So I'm very proud that we found a way to sort of make those two rivers meet, as it were.
Yeah, most definitely. I think I've got the other half of this book, and then whatever Rocco decides to do for the next one. I've got Murder, She Wrought coming out with a few minor changes, and I think that's about it. Just keep rocking the Next Panel Press stuff. Yeah, just draw all the time. That's all I do.
All right, cool. Well, guys, again, thank you for doing this early with me. I appreciate it. And I'm gonna drop. We've already got all your links, so I'm gonna drop links for you, Rocco, and you, Craig, down below. I'll drop a link for the Kickstarter for everybody listening, watching, that wants to go back it. Make sure you do. Don't wait till the last minute, or wait too long and then you forget that it ended. And again, thank you guys.
I want to say that too. Like for me, like, this is my first Kickstarter, so Rocco's kind of an old hat for this. So it's like, I know I've been bugging him, like, you know, like every single percent that it went up. You know, I message him like, oh look, hey, whoa, you know what I mean? And it's really neat to see. We're at like 92 or 93% right now, and I think this is our second week. The first week we were at 75%, and like, that's I don't know. For me, it's a big deal. It's kind of like, well, Jesus, like, people are actually interested. People actually want to see, you know, what we've done, and it's a really neat process. So I just want to thank everyone that's contributed and put in, and you know, it's really flattering and humbling.
Yeah,
And
so it's always an amazing feeling. It really is.
it's so
Yeah.
crazy how something like that can affect you. You know, it's really wild to see. So thanks everyone. I just wanted to make sure I put that out. I really appreciate it.
All right, right on. Well, again, guys, I can't wait to do this with both of you together, separate. Everybody go back to Kickstarter. And on that note, we're out.
Great stuff. Thanks, man.